Maimonides, 1,500 years later, writes that on mundane topics, Aristotle's view are superior to the prophet Ezekiel. It is the task of the philosopher and scientist to explore and explain the natural world. It is the prophet's task to bring God to the world. Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed is an attempt to reconcile Aristotelian thought and the teaching of the Torah. Stories have been told that Aristotle had nothing to teach the Jews because Greek philosophy is nothing but Jewish philosophy. And the story apparently is that Aristotle taught Alexander the Great. They came to Jerusalem, and Aristotle became a student of different Jewish sages. There was, I looked up some other things about Maimonides and Aristotle, and I just wanted to add this quote. Maimonides said, "Hear the truth from whoever says it." And I think that captures, I think, his bringing Aristotle into Jewish thought.
Thank you, Bob. Here, I'll take this and I can share it. Wonderful, Dorothy and Bob, thank you. Very nicely done. Let's begin. We forgot to say our blessing. So let's say our blessing for study before we go any further. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so we heard that the Guide of the Perplexed is about reconciling the teachings of Aristotle with the Hebrew Bible. That's in a nutshell what it's all about. And we've talked already in this course about why Maimonides finds this to be an important project, because Aristotle represents the highest of knowledge, secular knowledge, in his time, and the environment in which Maimonides lives in Egypt is a Muslim intellectual, cultural, political environment, and Muslim philosophers were deeply engaged with Aristotle as well, because Aristotle was the benchmark of knowledge, and Muslim philosophers around Maimonides were engage in a similar project, reconciling the teachings of Aristotle with the Quran. And Rambam felt that it was important to do that for Judaism as well, because if Aristotle represents truth and the Hebrew Bible represents truth, then they have to be in agreement, and they can't be in conflict with each other. The perplexity arises when somebody is well-versed in Aristotelian philosophy and is well-versed in the Hebrew Bible, and it appears to them that they teach different things, that they're conflicting. That's what it means to be perplexed. And the guide, so the book, The Guide of the Perplexed, is designed to show the perplexed person how to understand the Hebrew Bible properly and the sages of Judaism properly, so that you can see that they are actually in agreement with Aristotle's teachings. Okay, I think I've said this earlier on in the course, but it's worth repeating that Maimonides' project is very similar to what we might do in our own time. Some people do, to try to demonstrate that the Bible is to reconcile the Bible with science. Because you might be perplexed. The science teaches me X, the Bible teaches me Y. They sit there in conflict. What do I do about that? And unless you're willing to choose one over the other, then you're in a state of living with tension. And so we want to reconcile that tension. That's the condition of Joseph, Rambam's student, and Rambam's going to show him how to do it, how to understand it properly. But he wrote the guide, first of all, I mean, the subject matter is already very complex. Aristotle's philosophy is not easy. It's got a lot of complex concepts in it. But then even beyond that, Rambam writes the guide specifically for this audience of one, somebody who's very, very knowledgeable in all of these things, and would be able to understand it. He did not write the guide of the perplexed for us. We're sitting here reading it, but if he were here, he would say, don't waste your time doing it. It's not for you. Okay? But yeah, so he wrote it for a person of a certain type with a certain kind of knowledge. And then even in doing that, he also purposely wrote it in a cryptic fashion because he thought that if ordinary people or people who are not fully learned in the topics were to read it, that it might undermine their faith in Judaism and in the Torah and in the mitzvot, etc. And Rambam didn't want to do that, you know. Because if you read something and you think you understand it, but you don't, it can lead you onto the wrong path, and that was his concern. So the guide is deliberately cryptic, and it's very different from the Mishnah Torah, where everything is organized systematically, and if you want to look something up, you can find it just by looking at a table of contents and finding the subject. The guide is not that way at all. There's no table of contents. And discussions about particular topics are just all over the place. Okay, so it's quite a difficult book to read. Dory, is there some kind of audio interference?
No, it's a video. Seeing if there's a way to switch it on the owl for it to focus more on you, because I think with your voice going through the speaker, it's hitting the center of the room, so we see more of the people, the attendees, instead of you while you're speaking.
Yeah, I don't know. It's on the same setting as normal, but
yeah.
So
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's see, Dory. I want to, if you don't mind putting the share down, I want to kind of manage the share screen myself tonight. I also prepared a supplement for you that is going to help with our navigation of this material. And as I gave proper credit on here, the supplement was actually prepared by ChatGPT at my request. So let me take it. It's incredibly useful. I think it will be helpful. It created a glossary of key terms that Rambam uses in these chapters that we're studying tonight. And on the back side, it created a graphic depiction of Rambam's cosmology, which is important for us to see.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Joseph ben Judah ibn Simon, did he understand it? Do we have any way to know who Rambam was addressing this to?
No, he was addressing it to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
did he understand it? I don't know.
We don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know. All right. So first, before we read the Rambam text, I want to look through the glossary and the graphic, because I think in doing that, it'll give us a little bit of a running start into reading the guide, which is, if you try to read it, you see it's really complicated. All right, so I'm going to share this on the screen. Okay, so what we have here is the glossary of key terms in the cosmology sections of Guide of the Perplexed. So by cosmology, we're talking about a theory of the universe. Like what is the universe comprised of? How does it work? How is it structured? And Maimonides' cosmology is, of course, medieval. It's not accurate, and based on what we know of, from later sciences, that have figured things out. But in his time, that's what he thought was correct. And just like for whatever we know, whatever we quote know to be correct, 500 years from now, somebody might be saying, like, back in 2026, they thought this is how it was, and they were wrong. It actually turns out to be something else. Okay, but Maimonides' cosmology is medieval and reflects the ideas of Aristotle and his own time. And what's important to note here, I mean, there's a lot to it, even though it's scientifically incorrect according to what we know today. Theologically and philosophically, it's very powerful and worth knowing, I think. And secondly, I think it's worth seeing how he does it, what he does with this, because he's utilizing the best science of his time to help explain the Torah. Okay, now Rambam doesn't say that the Torah teaches science. He learns science from scientific sources, and then he uses that knowledge to gain a better understanding of the Torah, because the Torah is, in his mind, is perfect and eternally true. So, although it's not a science textbook, his assumption is that the Torah knows all of this about how the universe works, and it maybe it doesn't state it, it doesn't go into that, but once we know it from our study of science, we'll have a better understanding of the Torah, of God's own mind. Okay, so that's pretty cool. It would be as if in our time we were to take the most updated book of astronomy and study it and study it and learn it and really understand it, and then use that knowledge in reading the Torah and then try to integrate them. Okay, that's what he's doing. All right, so let's look first at these terms. Sphere is a big one in what we're going to read. Okay, it's defined here as a transparent, perfectly round celestial layer that surrounds the earth and carries a heavenly body, such as the moon, sun, or planets. Each sphere rotates in circular motion and is part of the ordered structure of the heavens. Now here, if you turn it on the other side, here's where our graphic is going to help us. Okay, so the graphic here shows the structure of the universe as Maimonides understood it. And what you see through, I think it's well done, is a series of concentric circles with the earth in the middle. Okay, but it's not flat. And the earth, I mean, I'm not talking about the earth, but it's the structure is not flat. Okay, and the graphic shows like depth to it, right? So it's like a cone, but if you imagine like you had buckets, I guess, or globes embedded like Russian dolls. Okay, globes within globes within globes. Okay, and the globe in the middle. The globe in the middle is the earth. Okay, actually, there's a little rock in the globe at the middle, and that rock is the earth. The globe in the middle is the sphere of sun. Okay, you see how it's labeled there? Sphere of sun. Okay, now, so this is like the nested globes, like Russian dolls, and each, and what it's telling us here in the short definition, the idea of the sphere is that as Rambam saw it, according to the science of his time, the various celestial entities, the sun and the moon and the planets and so forth, were each contained within one of these spheres. They're like implanted in the sphere, not rattling around anything, but just like glued inside one of the spheres. Okay, so whereas we know, and I know very little to nothing about astronomy and all that, but like our science today knows about how planets move and everything, and it's not that way. It's about like gravitational pull and orbit and all that. But as he sees it, each of these celestial entities is attached inside one of the spheres, and they move because the spheres move. Okay, and because the spheres are embedded within each other, the movement of the outer sphere impacts the movement of the next one, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, because they're one is inside the other, so if you move one, you're going to move the others. All right, so that's that we're going to get into more of that because a lot of what our passage tonight talks about deals with that. All right, let's go back to the glossary. Celestial spheres, the system of concentric spheres that make up the heavens. In medieval astronomy, these spheres carry the moon, planets, and stars and explain their motion around the earth. They're moving around the earth because the spheres to which they're attached are moving. Primum mobile, the first moved sphere. That's the outermost celestial sphere, whose daily rotation causes the motion of all the inner spheres. Its motion ultimately derives from God, the first cause. You may remember when in our first session, I think when we studied a little bit of Rambam's theology, we talked about the Aristotelian concept of God as the unmoved mover. Okay, God is what causes everything to move, but nothing causes God to move. Okay, so God is the first cause. Nothing causes God. God causes, but is not caused. Okay, so that's the outermost sphere. Fixed stars, the stars that appear permanently arranged in the constellations, they were believed to be embedded in a single sphere that rotates slowly relative to the outer sphere. Separate intellects.
Is that beyond the outer sphere?
No, they're in the spheres. They're in one of the spheres. They're embedded in a single sphere. So he's describing a universe that, you know, has all of this like active, these layers, and each layer is active. It's a different way, at least than I kind of think of the universe today based on what I learned, but he sees like a very animated universe, okay, which we're going to get into in terms of how it fits with theology. All right, separate intellects, non-physical intelligences that move the celestial spheres. Maimonides identifies these with angels. Each sphere has a corresponding intellect responsible for its motion. Okay, so again, this is not how we would talk about planets and stars as having an intellect of their own, but Rambam does talk about it that way. And in that sense, the universe, he's envisioning not only an active and animated universe, but one that has will. It's a mind. Each of these spheres possesses a mind, as it were, an intellect. Okay, so they're alive in a way that we don't think of the natural universe being. All right, the next one, angel. In Maimonides' philosophical language, An angel is not a winged being, but an incorporeal intelligence that carries out divine activity in the universe, including moving the spheres. Okay, so the angels and the intellects are the same thing for Maimonides. That's part of his reconciliation. Aristotle uses the term intellect. The Torah uses the term angel. It's the same thing. That's one of the teachings in the guide. He says, so someone who knows Aristotelian philosophy, when you read the Torah and you encounter the word angel, read intellect. And that's part of how he teaches how to reconcile. All right, unmoved mover. God as the ultimate cause of motion in the universe. God does not move the spheres directly, but is the final source of their movement, because all intellects seek to imitate divine perfection. We'll get to that in some of what he writes, which is, why do the spheres move? Okay. Circular motion, the perfect form of motion in ancient physics. The heavenly spheres move eternally in circles because circular motion has no beginning or end. You want to remember that, okay, as we learn about, as we read the text, and Maimonides explains why the universe works this way. Why are the spheres moving? And why are they moving in this particular way? That circular motion has no beginning and no end. Ether, yes, you pronounce it, the fifth element. The pure, incorruptible substance believed to compose the heavens. Unlike the earthly elements, it does not change or decay. 4 elements. The substances that compose the earthly world: earth, water, air, and fire. They are unstable and constantly changing, which explains generation and decay in the physical world. Sublunar world. The region below the sphere of the moon, including Earth. This realm is subject to change, corruption, and natural processes. Okay. Emanation, the process through which divine influence flows from God through the chain of intellects to the celestial spheres and ultimately to the earthly world. Emanation is the flow of divinity. Okay? And what we need to see here through these terms is that God is the first cause, is how Maimonides is describing God, the unmoved mover, but God does not act directly in the lower spheres. God acts through these intermediaries. The angels being the first layer, the intellect, the separate intellects, which cause the spheres to move, which then cause the other spheres to move, etc. And all of that, what we experience in this world, is God's divine emanation filtered through this whole process. Okay. Now, let's stop for a moment to think about why would it be that God doesn't act directly on the lower world and can't? Lori.
I'm thinking because God is immaterial, and I think God needs material stuff to.
Okay, well, so God is immaterial, yeah, and what?
And material things have to be used.
Yeah,
To,
exactly.
like the wind has to spread the sea, maybe, or the.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So God, remember, Maimonides, it's a principle of his faith that God is incorporeal. God has no form. Okay, God has no material substance. God is not matter. Okay, God is perfect, eternal, and unchanging. If I'm going to move this microphone, what's happened here? The interaction, describe the interaction.
Power
What's that?
over this.
I had the power over it, but how was I able to move the microphone? By moving my hand. There has to be some force. You know, I move my hand, that means that my physical self is changing as I move, because I go from this to that. That's a change, right? In order to grasp it, I have to have a hand, okay, in order to move it. God, none of those things can apply to God. God is unchanging and perfect. So like Lori said, actions, effects in the lower world, where the world of matter requires matter to change it. And God is not matter. So God doesn't, so Maimonides' God does not act directly in the world. And this fits with what, you know, what we have seen in his philosophy that we've studied before, which is Maimonides' God is transcendent, is way out there beyond, you know, not immanent. Immanent means like a God actively present in the world. God's presence is in the world through the emanation, but it's the flow, the filter from above. Okay. Intellect, the faculty of understanding that exists both in human beings and in the separate intelligences that move the spheres. For Maimonides, intellectual knowledge is the highest human perfection. We knew that, we'd studied that before. But here we have we read about separate intellects. There are these disembodied minds. You know, our mind, you can't hold a mind. It's a intangible thing. We have them. But Maimonides sees a world that includes these minds that don't have bodies out there, that are causing, you know, they're God's intermediaries. And they're the angels, exactly. So angels don't have any form for Maimonides. Okay? And then the last one, order of the cosmos, the hierarchical arrangement of reality. God moves through separate intellects. God causes the separate intellects to move, which cause the celestial spheres to move, which it caused the earthly world to move. The impact, that's the chain of impact. This structure expresses both physical causation and metaphysical dependence. Okay, Adam.
Is the implication here that human intellect can influence divine intellect?
No, you can't, because well, if you as a human being could influence divine intellect, what would that mean about God?
That he's less powerful than you?
Well, it made that, but more like directly, it would mean that God can be changed. God can't be changed in Maimonides' theology.
I'm still not clear what the difference is between human intellect and divine intellect, because he's talking about them in the same sense.
Well, divine intellect is the is intellect with a capital I. It's the perfect intellect. Our intellect is a less than perfect imitation of it. But and that's why we can't. God is perfect, eternal, and unchanging. So God is infinity and perfection, and we are finitude and imperfection. And finitude and imperfection cannot interact directly with infinity and perfection. Our encounter with God is as God's essence is filtered through these emanations. You find the same thing actually in Kabbalah. It's just it's different in terms of the actual content, but structurally it's very similar. Okay, Dorothy.
So I have a question about understanding what the function of prayer is in this system. Is prayer a communication with God?
Yeah, but God isn't impacted by it. because God can't be impacted because that would mean God could be changed.
So, the only way that quote prayer can affect a change is by human action. If God can't do it, then
Yeah.
there's an intermediary between God and man.
Yeah, prayer,
That's
that's right.
another man.
Well, but you cannot affect God. A human being cannot affect God in any way.
And why do we bother?
Just according to
Yes,
my
that's
mind.
Well,
exactly.
this is a Maimonides.
This is my mind.
And this is a Maimonides theology. And he says that prayer is God's will for us to do. It's a mitzvah. Okay, so in Maimonides theology, you're praying not because you're hoping to get something from God. You're praying because God wants you to pray. Okay?
Why does he want us to pray?
Because that's God's will. I mean, it's inscrutable, but God, that's part of what God desires. And so we do it. Think of, okay, an analogy. Many of you in this room have grown children. Do you want your grown children to call you?
Yes.
Okay, why?
That didn't take a long time.
Why? Why do you want them to call
It gives me pleasure.
you? Okay,
They're okay.
okay. Now, when they call you, what do you expect from them? when they call you?
Information.
What's that?
Information.
Information?
What you doing, what's going on? right?
Okay, all right. So, all right, yeah, Ed?
No one's ever called me king of the universe.
Yeah, you want them to call you king of the universe? All right, now, if your child calls you, like, one thing that my mom always said to my brother and me when we were kids was, I just want you to call me, and just say hello. That's it. That's all you need to do. Just call me and just say, hello. And that satisfies her need, okay, why she wants to call. Now, I might call because I want to ask her for things, and I might call hoping that if I call her, she's going to give me money or whatever. But when I do that, then the act is somewhat transactional, right? But the act of the call, I'm calling you, Mom. Imagine like your child called you, you picked up the phone, they said, hello, I gotta go by. Okay, that's different from, hello, I need money, can you help me? Okay, the one is about, it's transactional, I need something from you, that's why I'm reaching out. The other one is I don't need anything from you, but you need something from me. I'm calling to meet that need. Okay? Maimonides' theology of prayer, I think, is more like the former. Now, we can't really say that God has need, because that also is an anthropomorphism, that God doesn't have need, but it's God's will that we pray. We do it because God wants us to call. That's it. We're not doing it because we're trying to get something from God. We're praying because God wants us to call, and that's how we call. Yeah, David.
I have a problem with that analogy because even if you call me and say, "Hi, goodbye," you've done something to me. You've made me know the thought about you. You've made me feel good.
Okay.
I'm sure we should not supposed to have.
No, God doesn't have. No,
Therefore,
it's right.
You know what I mean? It's not even that.
You're not doing it to make God feel good, and God's not asking it to feel good. But we're humans, and you can't escape those things. But Maimonides says God wants you to pray. That's the will of God. There's no emotion behind it. There's no. You're not going to make God feel good by calling. You're not going to make God feel bad by not calling. You are either in alignment with the will of God or you are not in alignment with the will of God. Okay? And that's the theology of prayer. Now that you may like that or you may not like it, but that's what he's talking about. Ellen.
can we look at it that it's a possibly, a benefit for man? And it's a discipline and, it's, possibly some knowledge and some enjoyment will come to man from
Yeah,
this
sure.
discipline. So,
yeah.
so he's trying to transfer some responsibility.
Could be. I mean, yeah, we don't know the will, like why God wants us to pray. We only know that God wants us to pray. Yeah, but yes, and that doesn't preclude the worshiper from gaining benefit and enjoyment and insight and whatever. But to pray is to fulfill God's will and be in alignment with God's will. Adam.
I guess what I'm having trouble with is the translation of the word sechel, intellect. It's
Yeah.
more like it should be wisdom.
But Maimonides uses the term seichel.
Right, but sechel means wisdom more than it means intellect.
Well, to him it means intellect. It's the Aristotelian idea of the intellect.
So is there a Greek word for intellect?
I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is, but
No, what I'm saying
yeah.
is that.
But Maimonides uses the term seichel. Now, colloquially, you might say seichel is like you have wisdom, but that's not how Maimonides uses it. It's not about wisdom. It's about the intellectual capacity, the intellect. Okay, Arlene, and then we're gonna read the
Yeah,
guide.
so just back to the emanation.
Yeah.
So God transmits something to these angels
Uh-huh.
and they do the work. They sort of push the first button to start everything moving around.
Yes, but it is a little more complicated than that.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah, let's get back to that.
Yeah, we have a hand up on,
Okay, iPhone,
thank
go
you.
ahead, iPhone. Is that Naeem?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah,
So I wanted to ask you, is prayer a means of getting to Maimonides' goal of knowing God? Is that a means of doing it?
for sure, all mitzvot are that. Yeah, absolutely. So through prayer, you hopefully you gain insight. That's part of knowledge, just like studying Torah is part of acquiring knowledge, etc. Yeah, all the mitzvot for Maimonides are for the fulfillment of God's will and directed toward gaining knowledge of God.
So it's not just by studying you gain knowledge of God. By doing the mitzvot and knowledge, study and prayer, that's you gain knowledge of God.
And everything, all the mitzvot. Yeah, all the mitzvot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, wait. Now we're going to get into the text. So if you go into your unit 4, Mored Nevuchim, behind the green. Okay, we're going to look at our primary text. Now, this comes from a book that collects different kind of sections of the guide and organizes them by topic, so I found it useful. The author, this chapter is called Angels and Emanation, and he selected different passages from the guide about this and kind of put them together. They don't exist this way in the Guide of the Perplexed. They're all over the place, but he kind of systematizes it, and he writes an introduction to the beginning, and it's really a dense introduction. We're just not going to look at it. I didn't find it particularly helpful, but let's look at the text, and I want you to turn now. We're going to skip down to let's see where it starts. On page 343, so under where it says Mored Nevuchim, Roman numeral 2:12. We are going to look at the 4th paragraph there. It starts with an examination of physical science. Wait, let me just look at something before, just to make sure I didn't skip anything I wanted to see. But wait, let's go back, further up. Go to where it says Moreh Nevuchim, Roman numeral 2:11. On page 341. Okay. A man who is deductively oriented exclusively on studying and reading about the astronomical matters touched on here might presume that what he is reading are conclusive demonstrations that the form and number of the spheres are as they are said to be. Such is not the case, nor is this the objective of astronomy. Some points in astronomy can be demonstrated. For example, that the course of the sun declines from the equator. Of this, there is no doubt. But as to whether the sun has an eccentric sphere or an epicycle, this has not been demonstrated, a fact which does not trouble the astronomer in the least. For the object of astronomy is to propose a configuration which allows for the uniform revolution of the stars consistent with what is observed, while minimizing the complexity of the motion and the number of spheres. He's kind of telling us that this framework that I'm giving you is philosophical and it's constructed based on what we know, but there's a lot that we don't. Okay, this is why we prefer the eccentricity hypothesis, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and he goes a little, even so our system would not be original. For our purpose, okay. Skips underneath where it has the Job in brackets, and it's after the ellipses, it says, for our purpose, as you have understood by now, is not to give a painstaking and precise account of the intellects and the spheres as they really are, but rather to survey broadly the forces we encounter in existence. It all comes down to this: being below the level of the Creator, exalted be He, is divided into three sorts. One, disembodied intellects. Two, the bodies of the spheres, which are substrates of stable forms, such that forms are not interchanged among these substrates and the spheres do not change, essentially. And three, the present bodies which come to be and pass away, all of which have the same matter in common. Order and governance flow forth from God to the intellects according to their capacities. These in turn shed light and benefits from the good they have derived on the bodies of the spheres, which in turn radiate energies and beneficial effects upon this body, subject to generation and corruption from the wealth of good they have received from the grounds of their being. Okay, so far he's describing that first of all, there are three kinds of things that comprise the universe: disembodied intellects, the spheres, and matter, material things in this earth. Okay, God, he says, order and governance flow forth from God to the intellects. Now, the intellects are what? What did we learn then? They're angels. Okay, so when the system, the cosmological system, begins with God emanating toward the angels, which then reflect the emanation. They absorb it according to their capacities. Their capacity is less than the capacity of God because God is infinite, perfect, eternal, and unchanging. The angels are on a lower level than that. So they absorb what they can based on their individual capacities and then reflect it on to the next level. Okay, and so on and so forth. That's how God, divinity, reaches into our realm. Next paragraph. No source of good in this hierarchy exists for the sole aim and object of shedding its benefits. And there, I think he's like, the implications of that would be sheer absurdity. I mean, they're not just doing it to do it. Which means he's setting the ground to say there's some intentionality behind all of this. God is not a mindless force that just does just for the sake, but there's intentionality. For the end is nobler than the means. So the higher being would exist for the sake of the lower. For the end is nobler than the means. That would be if it's in the absurd, a thing no rational person would imagine. Rather, the case is as follows. A thing endowed with a certain perfection might be so endowed only sufficiently for itself, or it might be overabundantly endowed, such that its good suffices for itself and overflows to others. You might say, by way of analogy, that one person perhaps has wealth enough to provide only for his own needs, with none left over to support someone else. Another person might have sufficient left over to enrich many people, giving them ample to make them rich and leaving them enough surplus to enrich others as well. This is what happens in the case of being. The flood of being, which flows forth from God to bring into being the disembodied intellects, flows on from them. This is actually quite similar to Kabbalah. As I read this, Kabbalah just has kind of a little bit of different content, but structurally it's the same. That God is overflowing in divinity. You know, God is the container of everything. And so God's divinity overflows. You imagine like a cup or filled beyond capacity, and it flows. The wine, the water flows from the one bowl to the next and to the next, and there's so much. It's like those fountain, things. Okay. Each of them brings the next into being until the active intellect is reached, and the giving of being to disembodied intellects ceases. Do we have active intellect on our glossary? No. Okay. Active intellect is very important to all of this because the active intellect is the last stop before the human being. So the divine emanation filters through all of these various things and reaches into our realm. But even at that point, it's still, we can't grasp it. It's still too much for the human mind. The active intellect is the receptacle of all of it, and it refines it, I guess, so that it's accessible to the human mind. The active intellect is the final filter of divinity to human knowledge. So each of them brings the next into being until the active intellect is reached and the giving of being to disembodied intellects ceases. Each of them sheds further being in turn until the sphere of the moon is reached. Beyond lies the present body, subject to coming to be and passing away, that is, matter and all that is composed of it. From every sphere, forces flow. Their tide is stemmed when they reach the elements, and their power is spent in the influence they exert upon coming to be and passing away. These concepts we have already made clear are not in conflict.
Is this hallucination? I mean, seriously,
No, this is Rambam. Yeah.
Did anybody in his era understand what he was saying?
I think they did, because his work survives. All right, so he says, what does he say? That all of this, these concepts we have already made clear, are not in conflict with anything touched upon by our prophets and the upholders of our Bible. Since the flowing forth So I guess that's all Aristotle's cosmology. It says we haven't even gotten to the Bible. Okay, since the flowing forth or emanation of intellects from the deity has been mentioned repeatedly in our discussion, we ought to make clear to you exactly what this is. That is, what it is really that is given the metaphorical name emanation. Okay, so we have to now he's got to explain what's the content of this that is coming, that is flowing forth. David.
It does make it be seen that he views the stars as therefore being, more influenced by all of this stuff, this intellect is all closer to the stars than it is to us. Making, that's just, if Hashem is everywhere, then, it goes against that. That should start from the stars and then
right.
Goes against this idea that Hashem is everywhere, then he should be as close to us as he is.
Yeah. No, I think he thinks that God is everywhere, but it's God's emanation. The filtered presence.
It's coming down towards which doesn't make you partially, you get what I'm it doesn't.
Yeah, it's not so simple as to say that God is in everything and everywhere. I mean, it is, but in a more complex way. Yeah, but Maimonides is a rationalist philosopher. He's trying to explain, all of this comes to explain how can an infinite, perfect, and unchanging God interact with a finite, imperfect, material, corruptible world. And it has to happen through these mechanisms because perfect unchangeability cannot act on material, on the material. Okay, yeah.
He's using the word good here.
Uh-huh.
It's like God with an extra O. Because basically this is the same good that in Bereshit that came through. The first time you hear the word
Good,
is
yeah.
that the universe is good.
Yeah.
The question is, what does good mean?
Yeah, exactly, that's right. So I think as I'm understanding him anyway, I think the universe has like a moral valence to it. It's good. Like the Torah says it's good. It's not just is what it is. It actually is morally good. Yeah, Ivan.
But I think he's also saying that God gives it order, and it reminds me of the Einstein quote, that God doesn't play dice with the universe. So everything is ordered. And
everything is ordered.
These intellects are carrying out the orders in a sense.
Yeah, right. But I think that's true. But God's impact at the end of the cycle is not direct. Right, it's indirect through intermediaries.
Well, who are the intermediaries? The angels?
The angels and the spheres and all of this.
Themselves.
Yeah.
What does the sphere do?
The movement of the sphere causes the movement of other spheres.
Oh, but they don't cause anything else.
No, I think they cause the movement, but the movement of the spheres is also has a moral valence to it. I think we'll get to that in the reading. Lord.
Didn't some Jews believe in astrology? Could this be related to astrology, maybe?
I don't know. Good question. I'm not sure. Jackie.
I get the feeling that what ends up in the human hands is very diluted.
Yeah.
Because it's gone, so is Maimonides saying that we can't ever be, how bottom, are we bottom fish or are we like, we get on the same?
No, we're at the bottom of the emanation.
Bottom feeders.
Yeah, we're the bottom feeders on emanation. Yeah, it is diluted because at the higher levels that emanation is too powerful for us to absorb. You just can't. We can't. There's a huge chasm between infinity and us.
Yes.
Is what he's saying. And the universe is the mediator of that emanation, and it doesn't do it, it's not a mindless mechanical system. It's a directed, intentional moral system. Okay, so let's scroll, skip down a
Yeah,
little.
we have
in
a
the next
hand up
section.
on Zoom.
Okay, go ahead, whose hand?
Yes. So, Rabbi, how similar is this to Spinoza's pantheism? All lives and moves in God. Obviously, there's more detail, but how similar is this?
I think it's different because my understanding, I really don't know Spinoza that well, but Spinoza, I think, sees kind of the world and God as kind of, the same thing, essentially. Maimonides this is supernatural. Spinoza, I don't believed in a supernatural theology. But this is very supernatural. It goes well beyond the natural world. Okay, so let's scroll down to, in the next section, Roman numeral 2, section 12. Scroll down to the 4th paragraph. An examination of physical science reveals that no body affects another without either coming into contact with it or coming into contact with something else which comes into contact with it. In the case of a cause which acts only through intermediaries. This body, which is now hot, for example, was heated by fire, unless the fire heated the air and the air surrounding this body heated it. In the latter case, the proximate cause of the heating of this body is the heated air. Even a magnet attracts iron at a distance by a force it propagates in the air adjacent to the iron. That is why magnets do not draw bodies at any distance whatever, just as flame does not heat bodies at any distance whatever, but only as far as it can affect the air between it and the object to be heated. If the heated air is deflected from a candle, the wax will not melt. The same is true in the case of magnetic attraction. If something is heated, which was not originally hot, some cause must have intervened. He's like establishing a chain of causation. Everything has a cause. Nothing happens without a cause. In his cosmology, the only thing that happens without a cause is God. So like when kids, ask the question about, where did this come from? Oh, well, such and such. Where did that come from? Who made that? Well, who made that? Well, who made that? It's that kind of reasoning. There's a cause, there's a cause, there's a cause, until you go all the way back to the beginning, and the very beginning is God. There is nothing behind that. And then a kid will say, well, who created God? Rambam would say, nobody created God. If you're going to say something created God, then that thing is actually God. Okay, God's the first cause. Either a fire has been generated or the flame, etc. The same holds true, we discover, with all causes of change. The underlying cause is the blending of the elements, bodies which affect and are affected by each other. The cause of all such events, then, is the proximity or distance between one body and another. But events we observe do not depend on mere chemistry. The appearance of the panoply of forms must also have a cause. This is the form giver, which is not a body, since the author of forms must itself be a form. The following may help to elucidate this, lest you are confused. Every blending may be progressively augmented or diminished, but forms are not so. I think here he's talking about forms in the Platonic sense. So Plato, we talked about this before, I think, in somewhere. Plato had this idea that in the heavens there are forms, which are not like a form of something, but form with a capital F is the perfect essence of a thing. And everything that we know of in earth, whether it's a concrete thing or an abstract thing, is a reflection of the perfect form in the heavens. So microphone, this is microphone. But up in the heavens, there's a form called microphone. That's the perfect essence of microphone. And microphone, this microphone is just a reflection of that. The same thing with something abstract like love. Love, as we know it, is a reflection of the form of love that exists in the heavens, which is the perfect essence of love. All we experience in this world is the diluted divinity, not the perfect divinity. So I think that's where he's talking about forms. Okay, the forms are not so. They do not come about progressively and thus are not subject to motion. They simply come to be and pass away in no time. Thus, they are not the work of chemistry. Chemistry only predisposes matter to receive them. The form maker, like its products, is not susceptible to division. Thus, it appears that the maker, or rather the bestower of forms, must itself be a form, a disembodied form. Okay, he's kind of going on through his chain logic reasoning. Let's see where we can pick up. Okay, at the top of the next page, 345. It appears, therefore, that the interaction of bodies with respect to their forms entails a predisposing of their matter to the reception of the influence of something which is not a body, something whose effects are forms. Since the work of this disembodied mind is manifest and plain to be seen in existence, in all that comes about that does not arise from mere chemistry, it is known necessarily that this cause does not act through direct contact or at a fixed remove, for it is not a body. Its action, therefore, is always labeled emanation or flowing forth, likening it to a spring which flows in all directions but has no particular direction from which it draws or toward which it directs its flow. Rather, it flows forth from every direction and spreads its waters constantly in every direction, near and far. By the same token, this mind cannot be reached by forces from any determinate quarter or distance. This is not a spatial thing. There's the intellects that they're disembodied, so there's not an angel, it's just intangible. The flow is everywhere. Nor is its influence on everything else confined to a particular direction or distance or time. Rather, its action is constant, so long as something has been prepared, capable of benefiting from that ever-existent action termed emanation. Now, this fits with his idea of prophecy. We're going to do prophecy in another session, but just as a preview, here he's describing this system of divine flow, and he says it's always flowing. God is an eternal font that just pours forth, divinity into this system. And he says its action is constant so long as something has been prepared capable of benefiting from that ever-existent action. And he said before, the intellects receive the emanation according to their capacity. So for Rambam, the prophet plays a role in this. What is prophecy? Prophecy is the reception of this emanation. And the emanation is always flowing. So the question is not, is God giving prophecy? The question is there somebody who's capable of receiving it? A person whose mind is capable of receiving it is a prophet. Okay. So to use another metaphor, it's like a broadcast signal. God is always broadcasting the signal, but most people cannot pick it up and you know, until it's diluted all the way through the active intellect and such to the bottom. But some people can, and they're prophets. Yeah, Jerry,
So the prophet would be human as
Yeah.
opposed to like the angel who's.
correct. The prophet is a human who can
Yeah.
receive it at a higher level. Yeah, Michael.
Moses, was he the only one that could see the burning bush or the only one who could hear God?
Well, okay, so in Maimonides' telling of the burning bush, which he writes about in the guide, Moses doesn't see anything, and Moses sees fire in the bush, but he does not see an angel, because an angel is disembodied. It's what happens is Moses's mind encounters the intellect, the disembodied intellect. That's prophecy. That's the
He
prophecy.
sees the fire, the flame.
He sees fire, but he doesn't see,
The bush.
but there's no voice like coming out. The Torah says he saw an angel in the bush. Rambam says that you have to read that metaphorically, because angels are intellects which cannot be seen. His mind saw it. Like we say, I saw it in my mind's eye. That's what's happening at the bush, according to the
The
Rambam.
bush may not actually be burning.
Maybe not. He just detects, he
It's not
detects. something.
consumed. The bush-
It's not consumed. He saw the burning, it's not consumed. Okay, next paragraph. This designation flowing forth is predicated of God in Hebrew 2, where God is likened to a spring of flowing with water, as already stated. No finer comparison will be found for the act of a disembodied being, for we are incapable of knowing the true word corresponding with the true idea. The conception of a disembodied being's act is as difficult, at least, as the conception of a disembodied being. Just as imagination can conceive nothing but bodies or forces in bodies, so imagination cannot conceive the bringing about of any effect without the cause being in physical contact or at a particular distance in a particular direction. I think he's saying here that our minds, we can only imagine what we know, essentially, and what we observe. We see that everything has some kind of physical cause, you know, that makes it happen. But what he's saying is that that's not how it works in the upper spheres, because there is no physicality. Okay, he says, okay. And since some vulgar minds realize that God is not a body and does not draw close to the object of his act, they imagine that God commands the angels, and they in turn execute those acts by physical contact or coming into range, as we do. They imagine the angels too are bodies. Some even imagine that God commands a given thing in words like our own, that is, consonants and vowels, whereupon that thing is done. All this is dependence upon the imagination, which is also the true evil inclination. For all ethical and intellectual deficiencies are the work of imagination or result from it. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that, but your imagination can only conceive of certain of what we know. And he's saying there's some people who are ignoramuses who, you know, who think that it works in a certain way, but it actually doesn't. So they're wrong. They have errant understanding of God. Okay. The words "for with thee is the fountain of life" intend the emanation of being, and the completion of the line "in thy light do we see light" means exactly the same thing. Through the flowing forth of mind from you, we are enabled to think, to draw conclusions and inferences, and to apprehend intelligence in turn. Try to understand this.
Is that a dare?
It's a dare. Okay, but going back up where he says there's some vulgar minds realize that God is not a body. Okay, so they're right, God does not have a body. And since they're right about that, they imagine that God commands the angels and then the angels execute. But he's saying, no, that's not how it works. That's a result of vulgar imagination. You think God tells the angels what to do, but God doesn't tell. That's not how it works. He says, some even think that God speaks, like, angel, do this. He's saying, that's bunk. That is not how it works either. God's emanation works in a different way. Now, he doesn't describe it exactly, but in other reading that I've done, what I learned is, okay, so he's saying that the intellects, the disembodied intellects, the angels, cause the spheres to move. And they're not just mechanical gears or something. They are minds. They're intellects. They receive the flow of God, and with that knowledge of God, they cause the spheres to move. And the spheres move in a circular fashion. And we learn from this page that circularity in medieval physics is considered to be the perfection, the perfect kind of motion. It has no beginning and no end. That's what he's talking about here with the flow. There's no beginning and no end. It's out there, it flows. And the spheres, what is the intention of the intellects in moving the spheres in that way? Is because the spheres, and here's what he doesn't say explicitly here, but I learned in another reading, is that and the sages say, all creation longs for God. All creation longs for its creator. The spheres long for God. They seek to imitate God, just as we're commanded in the Torah to imitate God, walk in God's ways, to imitate God. Everything is commanded to imitate God, and the spheres imitate God by moving in this circular motion. No beginning and no end. Okay, they're being like God in that sense. They have no beginning, they have no end. And why do the angels initiate that? What I learned is that it's not because God is directing, but because God is evoking it. Okay, so an analogy that I read was God functions like, the emanation from God functions like, kind of like, the analogy was when a human being sees something beautiful, we are drawn to it. Okay, the object of beauty is not telling you, come to me, in so many words or now, but its essence invites it. Okay, it's like a magnet. We are attracted towards something beautiful, so we want to draw close to it. That analogy was used in what I read to describe the emanation of God. God attracts the motion of the spheres, doesn't direct them. God attracts them, and they want to emulate. Okay, Evan, you have a comment?
Two questions. One, this is Maimonides' writing. So
yeah.
And if you were alive today, I mean, the spheres and some of these other things made sense in those days.
Yeah.
But today it doesn't. Yeah. So he might have come up with a different way of expressing it between God and.
Yeah, well, what he would be doing, his method is to learn the highest science of his time and use it to understand what the Torah means. Okay, so what he would do, he wouldn't come up with something. What he would do if he was living now is he would study modern science. And then he would utilize modern science to understand and explain the Torah. Okay. Yeah, Andy.
in reading the part about quote vulgar minds, I'll use the term simpler minds. But he's saying that human beings, most, either prefer because it's easier or don't have the capacity to understand the tougher stuff.
Yeah.
I'm taking it to religion now, where a religion that has more physicality, where you can see a God, where God speaks, where angels have a body, probably will get more followers because it's a simpler thing to understand.
Could be, yeah.
We in Judaism, because we live in the time we live in, have a tough time between God has a body, doesn't, I mean, but I think it's just say, hey, I can grasp this, so I'm going in that direction.
Yeah, and you're hinting at a concept that a scholar I read this great book about the pagan world, where the scholar talks about what paganism and idolatry brought to the world was a sense of what he calls enchantment. The world is enchanted. There are gods everywhere. There's, this drama like between gods and, demigods and stuff unfolding all around you, and the God lives over there and all, and that Judaism and Christianity kind of disenchanted the world by, especially like a Maimonides, by taking God and saying, no, God is actually way out there. And we just get these diluted emanation. But what I see here actually kind of works against that, which is I think he may not be describing an enchanted world per se, but he is describing an enchanted cosmos where every aspect, all of these spheres and celestial bodies and all of these things are not just mindless mechanical things. They are enacting the divine will. They're enacting, they're yearning for God. They're striving to be like God. There's a moral dimension of it, and in that sense, the cosmos is alive and vibrant and enchanted in a way that I think modern science, and Heschel says this too, also modern science kind of disenchants, the world, because we say like, well, it actually doesn't work. It's not like the spheres care about God or the planets care about God. They're just pulled by gravity, and it has nothing to do with any kind of intentionality. But Maimonides' cosmos is intentional. And in this way, as one writer said, for Maimonides, astronomy is also theology. Through astronomy, we learn about God. And I suppose you could say the same about modern astronomy too. It's just that we'd gain a different understanding of God than you do from this. Michael?
Modern astronomy doesn't exhibit the intentionality.
Right.
That this astronomy does.
Yeah.
It's not where they say, well, the planets move in the orbits because that's what God wants.
Right, exactly.
It's explained in very, abstruse mathematical terms.
Exactly.
When they talk about energy, you say, people say, well, Einstein was wrong. God does play dice with the universe when you talk about quantum mechanics, where something has a percentage chance of existing.
Yeah.
In places.
Yeah. So this
science you wouldn't be
right.
able to use this.
And you're right. And so, well, but I think you can't use this science to explain the world. That's for sure, because this is not correct. It was correct in his time, but it's not correct now. But what you can use it for, I think, is to pose the question, about living in a world informed by modern science, can we find enchantment? Can we find God in the world? Because Maimonides did find God in the world and in the cosmos through his understanding of science. And this and Aristotelian science tells him, makes sense, the way he's explained it out now makes sense, like in the prayer book. You know, we read Ma'ariv Aravim in the evening, and one of the English translations of it in our Siddur says, you manage the stars as they travel through the sky, or you know, something like that. It speaks about God's presence in the celestials, you know, and that God can be that our ancestors, our rabbis, our liturgy detects the presence of God in the cosmos and in the astronomy. So we live with a different science. Does that mean that we are doomed to not be able to perceive God in the cosmos? Or can we? And if so, how do we do that? I think that's a question that Maimonides is giving me to think about. Okay, David?
I'm gonna say something which I'm probably gonna get beaten up for, but, I mean, I think his first two books are so amazing, such as the Mishneh Torah. Had he not written those, just written this, I think he would have been looked at as a nut. And I think that also very intelligent, because he's not using scientific principles. He's bending it, he's not, you know, even in those times, he's not showing A causes B as in science, he's just making this stuff up.
No, but this is the science of his time.
The science of his time would have used some powers, or they knew the world was rounded then. He's just saying, well, we've got this one, and this is causing force on this, is causing that. It's not a scientific, it's like the ramblings of the, you know, something.
Well, I don't know. I think I don't think that that's true. I think that's projecting the present onto the past. And Maimonides is universally regarded as a brilliant philosopher and who knew all the science and everything of his time. I mean,
Really brilliant. But it doesn't, you know, I'm just saying the Mishneh Torah is really brilliant.
well, and this too. The Guide to the Perplexed is one of like the, you know, great works of humanity, like from the Jewish world. But it's, you know, don't fall into the trap of presentism. You know, judging what we read in a 12th century text by our own standards and our own methods of knowledge. I think, and I don't know about, you know, medieval science generally, their methods, but I'd be willing to bet, because it seems like this is everything that I've read about Maimonides, that he's representing the scientific knowledge of his time. Now, I think in large part, when I say the scientific knowledge of his time, science and philosophy are much more integrated in the Middle Ages than they are today. Today, we think of science and philosophy as totally separate disciplines. But in the Middle Ages, science and philosophy were bound up together. And Aristotle's philosophy of the cosmos is the science. That's what it is. So, but you can go read. I mean, that's a good question to ask, you know, to the internet, or ask the AI, like, how well did Maimonides' writings reflect the science of his day?
How would we know if it's not a hallucination on the part of AI? Okay.
Well, okay, so it's 8:30, so let's end there. Welcome to the Guide to the Perplexed, friends. We've got a few more sessions on the guide. And you did a good job. Thank you, Dory. Thanks, everybody.